It was a Saturday. Clear skies. No rain. No reason for anything to go wrong. And yet, by sundown, 2 children were gone, vanished from their own front yard. No screams. No witnesses. Just silence. And a father who never forgave himself for looking away. Welcome to Uncommon Stories. If this story stays with you, hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from and when the truth found you. Now let's begin. September 18th, 1982, Springville, Oregon. A quiet town you could drive through in under 10 minutes. Just trees, fences, cracked sidewalks, and the kind of peace that fools people into thinking bad things don't happen here. But they do. And sometimes no one ever sees it coming. David Morgan lived on Hawthorne Street. Single father. A mechanic. Worked at the Sinclair station, just off Route 12. He wasn't the perfect dad, too tired. Too quiet, sometimes forgot picture day. But his kids love him. And every Saturday, without fail, they played outside while he changed the oil on customers' cars in the garage next to the house. Amber, age 9, and Eli, age 6. She liked horses. He liked bugs. Amber was the big sister, who packed their lunches. Eli was the little brother, who followed her everywhere. That morning, she braided his hair into little spikes and called them dragon horns. He giggled. David took a photo. Polaroid. They're both barefoot, smiling in the sun. It was the last picture he ever took. The kids were playing in the yard, just outside the garage. Close enough to hear his voice. Close enough for him to feel safe. At 11:14 a.m., a customer pulled up. David walked them through the oil change. Talked tires. Showed them the engine bay. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then 15. He stepped out to check on the kids. They were gone. No toys in the grass. No swing moving. Just emptiness. At first, he thought they'd gone inside. Then maybe next door. Then maybe the woods behind the fence. He called their names. Amber? Eli? Nothing. Not even a rustle. Just stillness. He checked the house. Ran up and down the block. Knocked on every door. Nobody had seen anything. The mailman hadn't noticed. The neighbors hadn't heard. No passing cars. No strange men. No signs of a struggle. No broken fence. Just a father, alone, staring at 2 small footprints that faded the closer they got to the woods. By 1 p.m., police were involved. By 5 p.m., helicopters circled the tree line. By midnight, there were dogs, flashlights, search teams, but not a single trace. The next day, David stood on the porch holding that Polaroid, the last one, and said, "I didn't hear them scream. I should have heard something. A cry, a step, anything. But there was nothing, as if the world had swallowed them whole. The police had no leads. The FBI got involved after 72 hours. Flyers went out. Amber and Eli's faces on every street pole. TV stations ran their names. But the story faded after a week. And a few months later, so did the hope. People whispered that David was lying. That maybe it wasn't strangers. That maybe it was him. But there was no evidence. No motive. No record of abuse. No drugs. No history of violence. Just a man, wrecked by grief, sitting in an empty garage, staring at 2 missing bikes. By 1983, the case had gone cold, and David stopped talking. He quit the garage, moved out of the house, lived in a trailer on the outskirts of town. No electricity, no phone, just silence. He said once to a reporter, "If I stay still, I can still hear her laughing," just before she vanished. That sound the only thing keeping me alive. Years passed. Searches stopped. Amber and Eli became faces in a dusty file cabinet. Their names only spoken by their father, who, year after year, left birthday card by the swing set that still stood behind the garage. The new owners never took it down. They said it creaked at night, as if someone was still sitting there. In 1992, 10 years after the disappearance, the local police received an anonymous envelope. No return address. No note. Just 2 Polaroids. One showed two children, backs turned, in what looked like a cement room. The second, a close-up of a single eye, wide, frightened, tear-streaked. The photo lab confirmed it was real film, dated to mid-1980s. No way to verify the kids. No DNA. No prints. Just fear frozen in time. David saw the photo and whispered, "That's her left eye. I'd know it anywhere." The case was reopened briefly. The FBI got involved again, but there was no trail to follow, and no one claimed the envelope. It would take another 18 years before the truth would come back to the surface. And what was finally discovered, beneath 6 feet of earth, 40 miles away, was not just a grave. It was a blueprint, and what it revealed would finally explain the silence and destroy what was left of a father's hope. They say time heals all wounds. But David Morgan would tell you, time just makes the silence louder. By the year 2000, the missing person flyers were gone. The headlines were forgotten. And the name Amber Morgan didn't spark recognition anymore, not even the town where she vanished. Only David still remembered. Only David still waited. Every September 18th, he returned to the yard, not the house that had been sold, but the fence behind it where the woods began, where he believed they'd disappeared. He never said what he hoped to find, but sometimes he just stood there, eyes closed, listening, as if he could still hear them in the trees. Then, in 2010, exactly 28 years later, something shifted, and it started with a flood. Late March, heavy rain soaked southern Oregon. A rural property just north of Armitage County suffered a mudslide. Trees collapsed. The earth pulled down part of a hill. A road crew was dispatched to clear the damage. And beneath the mud, buried in the slope, they hit something hard. At first, they thought it was a septic tank. But when they cleared the dirt, they saw steel. A door, welded, bolted shut from the outside. A sealed hatch. The land belonged to a man named Reuben Glass, mid-70s, reclusive, former welder, lived off-grid since 1985. Neighbors described him as polite, quiet, kept to himself. But one thing stood out. Reuben had no known family, no job history after 83, and no record of ever building anything underground. When police opened the hatch, what they found would change everything. The structure was small, just 12 feet by 12 feet, reinforced concrete walls. One cot, one chair, one bare bulb, and on the back wall, carved into cement, 12 names, none complete, just fragments. L, R, M, but 2 were unmistakable. Amber M, Eli M. The cot had decayed, but beneath it, wrapped in a blue tarp, 2 child-sized skeletons, carefully placed, side by side. Their arms were wrapped around each other. It took 2 weeks to confirm the DNA, but when it came back, it was exactly what David had feared, and what he'd never truly accepted. Amber and Eli, dead, buried, held, but not gone in 1982. An autopsy revealed something haunting. They'd lived for at least 2 weeks after their disappearance. Maybe more. No signs of trauma. No broken bones. Just malnutrition. And something stranger. Both children had tiny incisions behind their ears. Clean. Precise. As if something had been inserted or removed. But nothing was found in the cavity. Authorities searched the rest of the property. Found notebooks, maps, drawings of the hatch's blueprint, made by hand, dated 1981. All of it signed. R.G. Reuben Glass. He was arrested without resistance. Didn't deny a thing. Just sat at his kitchen table and said, "I thought they'd send someone sooner." During interrogation, Reuben confessed. Yes, he built the hatch. Yes, he took the children. Yes, he kept them safe. But what he said next froze every investigator in the room. They weren't mine to hurt. I was told to keep them quiet. He claimed he wasn't acting alone. Said a man had approached him in 1981. Promised money, blueprints, instructions, a deal, build the room, keep them hidden. Don't ask questions. The man's name? Reuben didn't know. Said he called himself Mr. Hale. That name again. Hale. The same name whispered in the Briar Falls disappearance. The same man suspected in other child vanishings. A name that showed up, but never left fingerprints. Reuben said he didn't kill them. Said they stopped eating. That they knew they wouldn't be rescued. And the most disturbing thing of all, they didn't scream. Not once. Not even the little one. Reuben was charged with kidnapping, false imprisonment, child neglect, and 2 counts of felony murder. But before trial, he died. Heart attack. In his cell. No confession. No apology. He left behind one note, scrawled on the back of a receipt. I never understood why they chose me. I never asked. I just built what they told me to build, and I kept the door shut. The notebooks in his home described more than just Amber and Eli. Dates, towns, names partially redacted, but one entry stood out. They send them in pairs, always siblings or best friends. Silence is part of the design. And there was again, silence, just like the Briar Falls 12, just like the Sector X case, just like the field trip kids who vanished with no screams. David Morgan was notified of the discovery. He didn't cry, didn't scream. He simply drove to the site, stood in front of the hole in the hill, and whispered, "I'm sorry, I didn't hear you." He asked for no funeral, just a burial near the woods, 2 small headstones, and the Polaroid, the last picture, placed between them. But he asked for one more thing, that the hatch be preserved, left open, never rebuilt. He said, people need to see what silence looks like, because that's what it becomes when no one listens. The world thought the case was over. Amber and Eli had been found. The man who took them was dead, and justice, whatever shape it could still take, had been buried alongside the hatch. But the truth wasn't buried. It was just starting to surface. After the discovery, the FBI reopened several cold cases, dating back to the late 1970s. All involved missing children. Most involved pairs, siblings, best friends, twins. Each vanished within minutes. Each disappeared from safe places, porches, driveways, backyards. And in nearly all of them, the silence was the same. No witnesses, no struggle, no screams. In 1984, 2 boys vanished in Wyoming during a church picnic. In 1986, a brother and sister went missing from a highway rest stop in New Mexico. In 1989, 2 best friends were last seen walking home from school in rural Illinois. The list kept growing, and in the margins of each case file, agents began circling the same phrase, kept them quiet. The most damning evidence came from a document found in Reuben Glass's notebook, a torn page, handwritten, labeled only as Phase Model Series 2. It listed 4 columns. Target age, 6 to 10. Configuration, 2 per hold. Timeline, 8 to 12 days. Monitoring notes, emotional decline begins on day 4. Language use reduces by day 6. Total silence by day 9. At the bottom, a line underlined 3 times. Those who adapt may be reintroduced. Reintroduced. The word hit investigators like a stone to the chest. It meant some children hadn't died. They had returned. But returned as who? As what? The FBI followed the new leads to a now-defunct research program based out of Colorado, something called the Menton Project. Officially, it had been terminated in 1983, but archive internal memos revealed funding from private defense contractors. One memo, dated March 1982, 6 months before Amber and Eli vanished, referenced a test titled Hatch Control Protocol 7B. The goal? To study social dissociation under enforced isolation and environmental silence. Subjects must not speak after day 5. Speech equals failure. Obedience equals survival. The memo included a typed note. RG approved for build. Oregon sector confirmed. Initial extraction pending. RG. Reuben Glass. He hadn't chosen to do it. He'd been selected, and someone had been coordinating it. Because across multiple projects, Menton, Quiet Foundations, Silence Treatment Labs, the same alias showed up repeatedly in visitor logs. M. Hale. This wasn't one man. It was a system, a design, one face worn by many hands. Then came the letter. It arrived at FBI headquarters in Quantico. No return address. Typed, signed simply, X. It read, "You're looking in the wrong place." It was never about who took them. It was about what they became. Some came back. You've met them. You just didn't know what they'd been taught. The letter included a list. 7 names. All adults. All with no childhood records before age 10. Each had applied for jobs with federal security firms. Each had passed lie detector tests without blinking. Each had no emotional reactivity to child cruelty scenarios during psych evaluations. Each had one thing in common, a scar behind the ear. A new term appeared in the files. Returned units. Silent, disciplined, compliant. Adults who had once been children. Children who had once vanished. Now back, but different. David Morgan was shown the documents. He read every page, then asked just one question. How many came back, pretending they'd never left? The FBI couldn't answer, because they didn't know, because the program, whatever it had been, had succeeded. Its goal wasn't to kill, it was to erase. Back in Oregon, one final search of the woods behind David's old house revealed something odd. A buried metal box. Rusty. Locked. Inside a small cassette. Labeled, Entry Trial Amber M. The audio was short. 7 minutes. A girl's voice. Soft. Clear. She says, "He told us if we were quiet, we could go home. That if we talked, it wouldn't be safe anymore." She pauses. Then whispers. "So we didn't talk. Not even when Eli cried. I just held him." Then static. The date on the cassette, October 3rd, 1982. 2 weeks after they vanished. They were still alive, still hoping, still obeying. And someone had recorded it, not for ransom, not for torture, but for documentation, like a case study. The agents who heard the tape said they couldn't sleep for days, not because of the words, but because of how quiet Amber's voice was, how calm, how rehearsed. It wasn't a confession. It was a performance, one taught by repetition, one built by silence. David took a copy of the tape, kept it with him, said it helped him understand. But when asked if he listened to it often, he said, "Only once. That was enough. I didn't want to remember her like that." He chose instead to remember the laugh, the Polaroid, the dragon horns, the bare feet on grass, and the swing that still creaked, even when no one was on it. In most stories, the villain gets caught, the mask comes off, justice arrives. But in stories like this, the mask stays on, and the villain isn't a person. It's a system, a plan, something built, brick by brick, to survive exposure. Because you can't catch what doesn't want to be seen. The more the FBI uncovered, the more tangled the truth became. The files from the Menton Project, the off-book research program supposedly shut down in 1983, revealed fragments, enough to trace the blueprint, never enough to name its creator. But behind every case, there were signs of structure, budget approvals, code names, internal evaluations. The project had phases. Phase 1, identification. Phase 2, separation. Phase 3, conditioning. Phase 4, evaluation. Phase 5, reintroduction or disposal. The words were cold, mechanical, and scattered through different memos, as if no one person had access to the whole picture. But one entry stopped investigators cold. A brief and signed memo dated November 1982, just weeks after Amber and Eli vanished. It read, Oregon site passed integration stress test. Subject, A showed leadership. Subject, he resisted verbal protocols. Recommend transfer to chamber program. The chamber program. No one had ever heard of it until they found a second memo, labeled Chamber Profiles, Batch 2. Inside were file codes. No names, just symbols. But one symbol matched cassette found beneath the woods. AM_7R, Amber Morgan. The chamber wasn't a location. It was a method, a set of behavioral environments designed to reshape a child's brain through silence, repetition, and forced dependence. Each chamber included minimal light, no verbal interaction, no stimulation, daily monitoring, the child's only connection to the outside world, a single adult voice pre-recorded delivering instructions. If you speak, you fail. If you follow, you return. Home comes to those who wait. This wasn't kidnapping. It was programming. The audio recordings recovered from Reuben Glass's property weren't random. They were part of curriculum. 37 labeled tapes, each with names like Obedience 1A, Environmental Trust 3B, Verbal Elimination Protocol 2C. Each tape repeated the same command. Be still, be silent, be safe. Over and over. The tapes had dates. They matched the 2-week timeline from Amber and Eli's disappearance, meaning someone had been documenting their psychological responses in real time and saving them, not to ransom, but to study. Meanwhile, the FBI uncovered another chilling clue. A storage locker in Wisconsin, rented since 1986 under the name M. Harlan. Inside, boxes, tapes, notes, photos, and in one sealed envelope, a single cassette, label, Return Subject AM. On the tape, a girl's voice, barely audible. She recites phrases. I don't remember where I lived. I don't say words unless I'm told. I wait. That's what good ones do. Then silence. Then the voice of a man. She's ready. Who was he talking to? And where was she being sent? The possibility became horrifying. Some children were reintroduced, but not to their families, to society, without memory, without identity, without history, clean slates, conditioned products. They could be anywhere now, living normal lives, filing taxes, working jobs, with a part of them permanently silenced. David Morgan never knew about the Wisconsin tapes. The FBI didn't tell him. They said it was classified for continuity, whatever that means. Maybe they didn't want to reopen what little closure he had left. Or maybe they were still afraid of what these children had been turned into. But David wasn't afraid. He kept looking, not for answers, but for others, other parents, other names. He wrote letters to families of children who vanished without a trace. He sent copies of the cassette transcripts, photos of the hatch, drawings Amber made before she vanished. He said, I know it sounds insane, but if your kid disappeared and you never heard a scream, maybe they were taught not to scream. Some wrote back. Most didn't. But one family from Idaho responded. Their twin boys vanished in 1981 from a campground. They had received a tape in the mail 2 years later. No return address. A boy's voice. Don't come find me. I'm safe now. I don't talk. They thought it was a prank. Until they heard Amber's voice on David's recording and broke down in tears. Across the country, similar patterns emerged. Parents started connecting. Stories aligned. And a hidden pattern emerged. Always pairs. Always silence. Always ages 6 to 10. Always remote areas. Each case had the same dark gap. No struggle. No ransom. No closure. David began calling it the Silence Network. He wasn't wrong. The deeper agents searched, the more disconnected shells they found. One ranch in Montana. One abandoned daycare in Kansas. A houseboat off the coast of Maine. Each location had signs of child habitation. But no toys. No photos. Just recording devices. And in every one, a recurring logo. A circle with an X through it. No name. No explanation. Just that. The circle and the X. The symbol for silence. Obedience. Erasure. To this day, the FBI won't confirm how many children were part of the program, how many were tested, how many were broken, or how many were returned. But internally, one file remains open. Silence Integration Network. Status. Ongoing, meaning the program never ended. It just changed shape, shifted names. moved deeper underground. David Morgan passed away in 2019. He left behind one note, taped to the swing in the yard. It read, "They weren't ghosts. They were just waiting to be heard." And across the country, more families are still waiting, still wondering if the silence wasn't just absence, but training. Some stories don't have monsters, just men wearing clean shirts, driving unmarked vans, speaking softly, like they're doing you a favor. By 2020, the investigation had changed direction. No longer a hunt for one man, but a map, charting years of silence, training, and erasure. The children weren't stolen for money. They were taken for study, conditioned like test animals, measured like lab rats. And some of them, most haunting of all, were released, not returned to their parents, but planted. The FBI Psychological Operations Unit created a task force. It was given one objective: identify reintroduced units in the civilian population. They gave it a name, Echo 3. They weren't looking for criminals. They were looking for ghosts, adults with no origin, no birth certificates before age 10, no childhood photos, no family, just clean starts. A disturbing number of them worked in surveillance, military contracting, private security, compliance testing, all passed their polygraphs, all registered as below normal empathy response, all had a scar behind the left ear. Then came the breakthrough. A woman in Kansas City, Megan Hall, filed a Freedom of Information request about her own adoption. She had always felt off, disconnected, no memories before age 9, recurring nightmares of metal doors, whispers, a red light blinking above her bed. She'd always believed it was a dream, until she saw David Morgan's documentary, until she heard Amber's voice on the recovered tape, and collapsed in her kitchen. Megan had the scar. Same place, same size. Doctors had once told her it was a birthmark. She believed them. When agents visited her, she was terrified, not of being hurt, but of remembering. She volunteered for testing. The results were staggering. Her stress response was flat. Her voice showed no tremor when describing traumatic scenes. Her reaction time spiked during one trigger phrase. Keep going. She didn't know what it meant, but her pulse rose. Her eyes dilated. Her fingers trembled. And in that moment, she whispered, "I think I wasn't born. I think I was built." Her DNA was processed. No matches in national databases. No matches in missing persons. But the mitochondrial profile was close to Amber Morgan's. Very close. Possibly a sibling, or, even more disturbing, a child. But Amber died in 1982, didn't she? The forensics team reviewed the hatch burial. 2 skeletons. 1 female, 1 male. Both small. But decomposition had distorted size. And the records at the time had never confirmed which child was which. No dental. No clear age markers. Just assumption. Now there was a new theory. What if the girl in the hatch wasn't Amber? What if Amber had been removed and someone else left in her place? What if Amber had survived? If Megan was her daughter, and her DNA showed 90% certainty of maternal link, then Amber must have been alive as late as 1991, which meant she may have passed the program. She may have become a reintroduced unit. The files on the Menton Project used the word reintroduction 28 times. Each time, it was followed by a number. One of them, RU07, Eastern Zone. Investigators believed RU07 was a child who had passed full silence integration and could be observed in long-term field conditions. That field? Kansas, where Megan was adopted. The woman who raised her had passed away in 2003. No birth records. No hospital logs. Just a forged adoption paper, traced to a now-defunct agency called Gatewell Placement Services. That agency was funded, in part, by a shell company once used by quiet foundations, the same group behind the underground chambers. It all connected. Megan wasn't just a survivor. She was a legacy, a product of the Silence Network. She was shown a series of recordings, audio tapes from the original project. She didn't recognize the words, but her body did. Her hands trembled. Her breathing changed. She spoke in short, stiff phrases. And in one moment of quiet, her eyes distant, she whispered, "We weren't allowed to dream. Dreams meant memory. Memory meant failure." It wasn't her voice. Not fully. It was rehearsed. Like something she'd been told to remember, and told never to say. When asked if she wanted to help find others like her, she said yes. She created a blog. Called it Echoes Before Silence. She posted tapes, old records, her own thoughts, and slowly messages came in. Adults who never remembered being children, who had scars they couldn't explain, who couldn't cry. One man wrote, "I don't have nightmares. I have rehearsals." Another, "Every time I try to scream in my sleep, I wake up with no sound." And one more, "When I was 10, I remember being told, 'You're ready now.' But I don't remember who said it." The Echo Project grew, and the FBI started to listen, not as enforcers, but as observers, because they realized this was bigger than abduction. It was reprogramming. The question no one could answer was, why? Why build silent children? Why teach them to obey without fear? Why scatter them like seeds across the country? Was it control? Was it a test? Or was it something worse? One internal FBI memo had this chilling note. If these children were placed in roles of influence, security, psychology, compliance, then the project succeeded. And if so, then the man called Hale didn't fail. He won. But no one ever found Hale. Not really. The name was used again in 2018, traced to a P.O. box in Arizona. But the person behind it? Gone. Just a printout left behind. It read, "Silence isn't the absence of sound. It's the absence of resistance." And now, there are hundreds of names, hundreds of possibilities, people walking through life with smiles that don't reach their eyes, with voices that never tremble, with memories that begin at 10. And maybe, somewhere inside them, the silence still echoes. Silence can be louder than a scream. It's not just what's missing. It's what was buried underneath it. A voice, a child, a name. And in the case of Amber and Eli Morgan, it was everything. In the years that followed Megan Hall's discovery and the unraveling of the Silence Network, a quiet war began, not with guns, not in headlines, but in documents, in sealed boxes, in private messages sent between strangers who shared one thing in common, a hole where their childhood should have been. The FBI never gave an official number, but internally, agents now believe over 300 children were part of what they call the reintroduction grid. These weren't just abductions. They were placements, products of a system designed to extract voices and implant silence. Some children were trained to forget. Others were trained to obey. Some were abandoned after failure. Others were embedded. And some still don't know. They walk through life with habits they can't explain. Turning off lights before speaking. Flinching when asked about their past. Sleeping with their hands folded across their chest, staring blankly when asked, "What was your earliest memory?" They are survivors, but they were never given that name, because to the world, they never existed. In 2021, a sealed room was found beneath an old processing plant in Nebraska. It was hidden under the foundation, accessible only through a false wall. Inside, 12 chairs, 12 sets of child-sized headphones. A reel-to-reel player still humming when connected to power. The audio? 10 hours of silence, broken only by one line, repeated every 30 minutes. "Remember, quiet is safe." Outside the room, scribbled on the wall in black crayon. "I tried to scream, but I forgot how." They found no bodies, just an exit door, leading to an alley, that opened into a public bus terminal, as if the training had ended. And the children had been released. Someone left them there. Someone who believed they were ready. Someone who believed silence made them stronger. And maybe it did, but it also made them disappear. Even when they were standing right in front of you. The girl in the hatch, the one David buried thinking it was Amber, was never identified. No DNA matches. No missing person file. Just another child erased, used, swapped. Megan Hall underwent further testing. Her memories came in fragments. A blue light, a knock, a number 11, and a phrase, "We go where they send us." In 2022, a new department was formed under the Office of Civil Protection. Its purpose: support and recovery for suspected survivors of behavioral reintroduction programs. Its first intake: 12 adults, age 34 to 41, all with the same scar, all with blocked childhood memories, all drawn to one phrase they couldn't explain. "If I speak, I break." They called themselves the 12. They met in private once a month. They didn't always talk. Sometimes they just sat in silence. But for the first time in their lives, no one told them that silence was required. The FBI still searches for the name Hale, but the belief now is that Hale was never one man. He was an identity, a passphrase, used by multiple handlers within a larger system, a system that now spans nearly 5 decades. And still no arrests, no trials, no accountability. Because when a program is buried deep enough, the law forgets where to dig. David Morgan didn't live to see it all, but he left behind a letter, typed, signed, unsent, found in a drawer in his trailer. It read, "I don't need answers anymore. I just need to know she knew I never stopped looking. That even when the world forgot, I still said her name out loud. Amber, Eli," names whispered in the wind, in the woods, in the swing that still creaked. The swing was eventually taken down. A new family moved in, painted the fence, planted flowers. But every year, on September 18th, a stranger still leaves 2 paper cranes at the edge of the yard, one with an A, one with an E. No note, no footprints, just the cranes swaying in the breeze. No one knows who leaves them. Maybe a survivor, maybe a parent, maybe someone still trying to understand what was taken. There are still files marked classified, still boxes sealed in vaults, still cassettes that have never been played. But the truth doesn't need to be complete to be felt. And what was done to those children, it still lives in silence. If you see someone who stares a little too long, if they pause before answering a question, if they flinch at praise, or struggle to cry, remember, some of them were trained to vanish, not from sight, but from memory. Not all scars are visible. Not all silence is peace. And not every child who vanished was ever truly missing. Some were told to obey. Some were told to wait. Some were told, "You'll go home when we say you're ready." But home never came. Just darkness. Just the hum of a reel-to-reel. Just a voice that wasn't love, but sounded close enough to believe. They were never ghosts. They were never gone. Just hidden and waiting for someone to speak their names out loud.